All right.
You are live.
Hi. Can everyone hear me? I guess just dance. You get your avatars to dance if you can hear me. It's nice to be here with you all in this. Yeah, there we go. All right, we got a couple of answers. It's nice to be here with you all. You guys can dance the whole time. You don't have to stop dancing. It's nice to be here with you all, and it's, as Daniel said, my name is Sarah Meister. I have been in crowdfunding now for 7 years. Before I was at Indiegogo for 3 years working on the hardware team. I was the second in command at Van Alexandra, an agency best known for the Neil Young Pono music player, the Joan Didion documentary, and the NYCTA Graphic Standards Manual and the NASA Graphic Standards Manual. There I helped to raise a little over $20 million for around 30 campaigns. And at Indiegogo, I helped hundreds of other campaigns raise about a little over another 20 million. So I've helped to raise about 40 million just in those few years alone. And in 2019, I went solo just so that I could work directly with as many campaigners as possible and make myself get kind of more skin in the game and learn some more about the process as well. And what I'm presenting today is just a little history of crowdfunding. Obviously, I'm not going to be doing a 101. I'm just going to share some notable campaigns through history that I think everyone interested in crowdfunding should know about, and talk about why they matter to crowdfunders and what we have to learn from them, so that you can leave here today feeling informed, feeling like you have a few campaigns to recall, and definitely if you have backed one of these campaigns, start to dance, and maybe we'll do a Q&A at the end and you can talk about your experience as a backer, which I think is the most important experience. So without much further ado, here we go. I'm gonna share my screen. Share. And I will do a full screen of this bad boy. All right, so here we go. The history of crowdfunding.
And for anyone who doesn't know this, if you click Sarah's screen feed at the top, you can maximize her slide deck, and that way you can see it a lot easier. Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Daniel. All right, so as I said, this isn't a 101. By this point, everyone, especially at this conference, knows what crowdfunding is. It's an alternate form of fundraising, than some of the traditional forms of fundraising in the past. I hope this isn't a yawn fest. I hope that this is kind of fun and entertaining. So a little bit about me. Worked in crowdfunding since 2014. I helped to build a premier crowdfunding agency from the ground up. Worked for Indiegogo for a while. I've raised around 40 million. I've worked with hundreds of campaigns, and now I do private product launch consulting. I've got about 4 clients right now doing crowdfunding campaigns and pre-sales and B2B. So really starting to turn the corner from crowdfunding exclusively to all sorts of pre-sales and product launch options. So for those of you that didn't know, crowdfunding started in 2007, right before we had a big financial crisis, and it sort of gave the product development and innovation circles all new life. It was a way for people to get the funding they needed at a time where that was really hard to come by. Over the last 14 years, what are some of the most notable highs and lows, lesson learns, and industry developments? That's just what I want to cover today. So here's a little, sorry, what was that? Okay, I couldn't hear you. Sorry about that. I'm just going to keep going. So here's a quote from Eric Mijkowski, the former CEO of Pebble. The most rewarding feeling in the world is seeing someone out in public using a product. If you could put your mic on mute, and maybe we could talk about your question at the end, that would be great. So you guys have read this. I think we all know the feeling of when you've worked on something and you've built something, you've been able to see it out in life. Like, that's why we all do what we do, but sometimes it doesn't end up the way that we had intended. So first we'll talk about some really big successes. Hello? Daniel, do you know who is speaking?
Yeah, I think it's just a mic influencing something else. I'm going to mute them.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. So here we've got the Oculus Rift, which I think we're all very well aware of. I think probably most people out there in the world don't realize that this was actually crowdfunded on Kickstarter. I think it's a very mainstay product, VR headset. Here is a little bit of the details of their campaign for us to all consider. So they've been around since about 2012. They raised almost $2.5 million on Kickstarter from over 9,500 backers. They were not pitching a polished or refined headset, which I think was really true of the time when, between 2007 and 2016, it was fair for campaigns to launch a product that was more in a prototype phase, wasn't as far along in its production. And as many different backers and post-campaigners have said, the specs of the product were not mind-blowing. They weren't great. Backers were actually more motivated to support the product because of their mission to revive an industry where others had failed. So the VR industry had gone through many kind of hills and valleys of product innovation, and here seemed like a really ripe opportunity with people who had a product that had a lot of promise and potential. Within the first 24 hours of their launch, the product exceeded its fundraising goal of $250,000, and they eventually sold out everything that they could manufacture, which was around 6,500 units. And as you can imagine, there was just a ton of demand for the product at this point. But instead of focusing on fulfilling more of that demand, they did a really smart thing, which was they focused on iterating the next gen of the product. And then they launched their next gen. And a week after the release of the next gen, that's when they were acquired by Facebook for $2 billion. They suffered some cultural backlash after that, but they ended up now really, really scaling up virtual reality, and they are, I think, the name brand of VR to most consumers. And they are in all sorts of different applications, from retail, entertainment, hospitality, travel, and even medical applications. My husband is a physical medicine and rehabilitation doctor, and he has actually seen certain rehab procedures that involve people that are paraplegic or quadriplegic using the Oculus. So I think it's just really immeasurable, the applications that the product has, from such humble roots.
That's super cool.
Kickstarter. Yeah, such humble roots as a Kickstarter campaign, right? So this to me is just picture perfect success story, and success is defined all sorts of different ways. When I speak to people, they mainly say, "Oh, I want to have $1 million campaign," right? Who doesn't? Everyone wants to have $1 million campaign. But what Oculus did was they were very clear about what the product was. They didn't try to put lipstick on a pig. They set their sights on what the product could be. And I think eventually one of the founders said that they decided to go forward with the Facebook deal, not to exit the business and be done with their role in Oculus, but really to scale this mission to bring virtual reality into the world at a rate that they could not themselves do without that type of funding and those types of resources that Facebook has to offer. I think it'd be interesting topics for later for you guys to discuss. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about Facebook's role in the way that VR has been scaled and the access that now many modern consumers have to VR and Oculus's role in that development? So this, for me is, I think, something we should all look at as like the archetype of a campaign. And then there's Hive, which is just completely different, right? It's not as high tech, but it is this $13 million campaign. They raised two campaigns actually that both raised about $13 million on Indiegogo, and it's a beehive that has a tap. And how simple is that? It's a father and son team from Australia, and they were actually very broke when they finally launched this campaign. It had been a passion project of theirs forever. They care so much for the environment and protecting bee cultures, and they spent every cent that they had towards launching Hive and bringing this vision of sustainability and beekeeping and saving bee species to the mass market. They launched in 2015. They're still around today. They raised nearly $30 million via two Indiegogo campaigns from almost 75,000 backers worldwide.
So is that the most anyone's ever raised?
No, it's not. I'll get to some other campaigns. It is, and these guys are very humble, and you would never think like they have a machine behind them. It's just they had a really great idea, and they had like I've never actually gotten honey off of beehives, but I've watched videos, and it's very complicated and sticky. And so imagine these people that are used to getting stung and being sticky, and those are two things that sound awful just to begin with. But then when you actually can just use a tap, how easy is that? They really made beekeeping and honey production accessible to people for the first time. And then in addition, they delivered all of their products somewhere behind schedule, which is just a fact of life with crowdfunding. And now the product is assembled and shipped within 24 hours of an order. And the products are about $500 to $1,000, give or take. They increased beekeeping in the U.S. by 10% within the first couple of years of their first campaign. They launched their first campaign after bees and their well-being had been a hot topic in the news. All of this is relevant to some points I'm going to make towards the end. So be looking out for these trends, right, that you're seeing, like newsworthy. It's something that had been on people's minds, right, similar to VR. They became a certified B Corp after their second campaign. They were on B Corp's Best for the World list in 2019 and 2021. Low environmental footprint products. And then at COP25, they joined 500 other companies to accelerate reduction of their greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. So there's also the trend of having a very positive mission for the world, which is reducing their environmental impact, saving bee species, and getting people more kind of connected to the earth and everyday. And then they expanded their product line to include beekeeping apparel, pollinators, smokers, brood boxes. There's more, but they're super technical beekeeping terms, so I spared you all there. But lots of different family of products that they had with this really great core idea. So it's a profitable company, and the sky's the limit for what they can do next. Now we get to Pebble watches, which, to answer your question, Daniel, this is one of the companies that raised over 20 million. And I think it's really interesting that you asked that, because one of the things I am trying to get to with this talk is that, why do we all not know about Pebble time, right? Like, Pebble time in our industry and in crowdfunding especially should be fresh in everyone's memory. There's not really a formalized education process in crowdfunding, and a lot of people sort of have a very shallow understanding, sorry for kind of lack of a better way of putting it, of the history, and of like the stories that are so important. And people launch campaigns without ever knowing about Pebble time, which to me, I think that's one of my missions in life, is to educate people about campaigns like this, and how vocal their founders are about educating people and trying to prevent certain things in campaigning from repeating themselves. So Pebble was around, Eric launched the product before they launched the campaign. So I think it was actually around since the 2008, but he launched his first campaign in 2015, and then there was a second campaign shortly after that. They raised over $40 million from 3 Kickstarter campaigns, and over 200,000 backers. They went on to sell 2 million Pebble watches worldwide. After the success of the first Kickstarter, they had to let go of a quarter of their 160-person staff. They had to come back to Kickstarter because they were unable to raise funds after the successful first campaign, due in part to layoffs, but also due in part, if you read more about it, due in part to the fact that they had raised all this money. And so backers started to feel like, why do we need to give you more money? Investors were curious, why do you need more money? So they actually really struggled to raise the additional funding that they needed. And then nearly 25,000 backers bought the Pebble Core, one of the products in their last Kickstarter. The core would never be delivered, and they'd have to refund all of those orders. After the success of the second successful Kickstarter, they were unable to raise funds. Pebble got criticism for going to the Kickstarter well too often, and they eventually had to shutter the company and sell all of their assets to Fitbit, and non-developer employees were all let go. This is a tragedy in the campaign world, because I remember when these campaigns would drop and it was like everything stopped. And one of the things that Eric, the founder, mentioned was that their product was focused only on productivity. It wasn't really focused on fitness or goal setting in personal life that we all really associate with some of the core the core features of something like the Apple Watch, for instance. So because they didn't have their finger on the pulse of these like core needs of the customer, and they went all in on productivity as like the main driver for why someone would wear a watch like this, that was a major upset, especially as the Apple Watch hit the market and Fitbit released smartwatches. And so that was something that caused them a lot of trouble. Apple Watch and some other wearables also experienced the same issue. They were all late to the game on fitness being the most kind of important interest that customers had for wearing a device like that. Potato salad couldn't be any more low tech here, but you can't do a crowdfunding campaign without knowing about the potato salad campaign. So here we go. It was launched by Zach Danger Brown. He wanted to raise $10 to make potato salad. He ended up raising over $55,000 with the help of almost 7,000 backers. So right away, I think one of the things to communicate about crowdfunding is like, you could have a hit on your hands. You could also have a hit on your hands. So you sort of have to be aware for like what taking on 7,000 customers means. Like this isn't, crowdfunding should be taken seriously. He admittedly added most of the perks to the campaign when he was drinking in a hot tub at a bachelor party, which is pretty funny. And then he ended up dedicating like the next, I think it was like 4 or 5 years of his life to fulfilling those bachelor party perks. He thought the platform would step in and cancel the campaign, but it never did. That's a really core lesson that we should all leave with today. That when you're launching a campaign, there isn't like a big brother that's pulling the levers for you. Especially some of the platforms are very hands-off. And if the ship starts to sink, it's on you. It's no one's going to step in and save you from your campaign. They will like to take a lot of the credit if the campaign is doing really well and is a blockbuster. So take that with a grain of salt. So instead of canceling the campaign and refunding the backers, Zach Brown hosted a massive potato party called Potato Stock in Columbus, Ohio. He had to read aloud thousands of names while he himself made all of the potato salad for the event, which was part of his rewards. He created a potato salad cookbook that's now available for sale. And he donated a significant portion of his funds to charities fighting hunger and homelessness in his home city. He had to leave a successful software development company he had a 50% stake in, sold all of his shares so he could focus on delivering all of the potato salad rewards. So in many respects, this is like a success story because it's warm and fuzzy. And in many respects, it's not, right? Because here's this wonderful person who was making a joke, and then he had to sell his 50% stake in his software company because he was committed to delivering potato salad to people. So important takeaways here, and definitely a good one to know as far as just like the zeitgeist of crowdfunding. Next, we have Gebo, which is a social robot out of MIT. Some of you may be familiar with it. Gebo has an interesting future. It was launched in 2012. They raised over $3.5 million via an Indiegogo campaign with the help of 7,000 backers. And they raised over $65 million in VC funding. There were a series of setbacks with localization issues overseas that led to a series of delays. They walked back some product specs and that were offered after the campaign had already ended. And then knockoffs called the Odings appeared on retail sites as a result of stolen IP before the Gebo was even shipping. So these are things that I think for anyone that's familiar with campaigning, it really sounds like, oh, this is just like the swan song. Like we've heard this before. Like this great funding, excellent raise on a platform, but they started to overpromise things before the campaign launched. They didn't have the product fully developed. They didn't have the manufacturing fully set before launching, which are classic crowdfunding mistakes. Amazon launched the Alexa shortly after, and it was 10 times cheaper while the Gebo was still in development. And Gebo was something like $700. They eventually refunded all orders outside of the US and Canada, and they announced a during this time, they announced a portal for communication with backers, which had to be built among all of the delays instead of just doing a simple system they could maybe do today with something like Slack or a Facebook group or a much lower FI version. But despite all this, they were one of Time Magazine's best inventions of 2017. They really paved the way for a lot of social robotics, which are expected to expand to 500 million by 2023, half a billion customers. And NTT actually just purchased Gebo's assets and is going to continue operating the Gebo for customers that have become attached to theirs. Many of the users are socially very connected to their Gebos, and they have become integrated in family. They feel like it has a personality, it has a soul. So although this is by many many people would agree that this is not a successful campaign, despite a lot of the flashy fundraising and the MIT Association. This campaign has really done some amazing things for society's embrace of social robots and kind of the future that they have with us. How am I on time?
We're winding up, so we could start a more question and answer session. I see a couple new folks have filtered in, so guys, this is an intimate session here. We're just doing a workshop with Sarah, who knows more about crowdfunding than almost anyone who exists. And if you haven't already, you can maximize your screen share by clicking on the arrow button at the top. Back to you, Sarah.
Yeah. So I'll kind of wrap up with two last campaigns real quick. There's the Coolest Cooler, which hopefully you've all heard of. They raised over $13 million via one Kickstarter campaign from over 60,000 backers. They underpriced their products. They set prices before they knew what their manufacturing and shipping costs would be to try to recoup funds. They sold products retail for half the Kickstarter price, which is like so bad. You don't do that. They've roughly fulfilled about 2/3 of the orders, and some backers waited 5 years before they were told that they would never receive one. And of that last third of the backers, only 7,000 of the 20,000 of them ever received a $20 loss check that was arranged by the Oregon Department of Justice via this class action lawsuit that was against the company. This is just considered to be one of the biggest crowdfunding failures in history. If you're not familiar with it, go and read as many articles. Go and check out their campaign page. This is one of the tried and true do not do campaigns. So definitely, if you're considering launching a campaign, it's worth looking at. And then there's Lily, which I remember when these guys launched, and I can't actually find their campaign page anymore. They launched this fancy robotics, like a drone, and the goal was that you wouldn't need to use a GoPro ever again. It could take really exquisite videos of you, and they went gangbusters. They raised over $35 million via crowdfunding and pre-sales, and they went on to raise an additional $15 million in VC funding. The campaign featured breathtaking videos that were claimed to be shot with the device, but it turns out that they didn't shoot the video with the device, and there was a lawsuit filed against Lily on behalf of the people of California, claiming that they intentionally misled customers with their video by exaggerating the product's functionality. There were unreasonable shipping dates. The campaign violated rules around delays, and there was no system in place to handle a vast percentage of their orders. This all made the Lily drone eventually go bankrupt after the nearly $14 million civil suit, and they sold all of their assets to a budget drone manufacturer, which released a sort of lukewarm version of the product the following year. So to wrap it up, what has this taught us? One, In crowdfunding, recent demand is key. The platform audience isn't enough. I encounter people all the time that say, oh, like this is just a genius idea. The people in my immediate circle love it. I can launch this on the campaign platform and the backers will love it. I've seen similar things do well. Well, the secret is there either needs to be, you're on a Reddit board about a given type of product and people are talking about their desire for this product all the time, or you actually go and you build the audience ahead of time so that they know that you're building this product and that they are committed. Otherwise, that's not reason enough demand, or that isn't demand enough, and people will not show up for the campaign. And then always launch with the minimum viable product, not what you want the product to eventually be. The more clear you are with backers, especially the backers that are really native to crowdfunding platforms, the more interested in supporting you and the more understanding they'll be when they get the product and it's an MVP. Like most crowdfunding campaigns promise their backers the moon and the stars, and they deliver a very kind of hollow version of that. And that's really not the backer experience that anyone wants, right? They want to support you. So be realistic about your goals with your backer community. And then know your product costs. I can't stress this enough. You should not launch a campaign unless you know exactly what your shipping costs will be, what it will take to manufacture, and then you should provide some cushion on top of that, and not offer your product 50% off when you can't afford to do that. Start small with product distribution. A lot of early campaigns got in trouble because they wanted a global impact for their products, and then they realized they had no idea how to distribute products in Asia or in South America or even in Africa and Europe. Like they did not know. So I actually recommend, if it's your first campaign, start small by just shipping locally. And then as you grow, you can develop your product to have a really excellent execution in some of those other territories. Press is an addictive distraction. I've worked with many founders that become more concerned with the press than they are with the actual quality of the product. There are some of these products like Pebble, for instance, that receive just gangbusters press, and without I think that there's a time when your product is doing well, you can just draw the line and you can say, okay, no more interviews, we have to focus on the product. Whereas a lot of people decide, like, we just want more and more and more and more and more, and that can become a major problem for you. So really always be very specific and particular about the press that you have, and find partners that can help you with that. Again, platforms don't step in. In the instance of the Coolest Cooler, backers were even curious why the crowdfunding platform did not disperse the fees that they took, which was around 8%. That could actually be given to customers, and that could help the Coolest Cooler company out. Platforms just do not do that. They see the whole aspect of crowdfunding as not buying the product. It is investing in potentially receiving a product. And so don't go into a crowdfunding campaign expecting that the platform will be responsive to your emails. Don't go into a crowdfunding campaign expecting that they will give you a thorough review, and just be very kind of low in your expectations. Protect your product. Only launch your campaign when you're basically ready to manufacture, because it is a recurring trend that IP is stolen and then launched before these other campaigns can actually deliver. And then you will experience people buying the product from overseas and returning yours and asking for a refund. So not something you want. Be really careful to protect your product by any means possible. under promise and over deliver. I think this is like the golden rule of crowdfunding, as much as you can, especially around shipping, and especially around product specs. Always keep the backers happy, communicate with them often, and never deliver something to retail customers if backers haven't received the product themselves. That will create a firestorm online that will be tough to live through. And then never lie to backers. They will find out. A lot of backers are journalists and bloggers, and they will go to the mattresses about it. So important to know. We can just take questions now too, Daniel. I know I kind of went over here. So I'll leave these industry developments, industry development slide up, and then people can ask questions now.
Wonderful. Well, Sarah, this was just an absolute goldmine of information for a half hour. So thank you so much. Like, this is fascinating. Yeah. So, unfortunately, the Topies can't clap yet, but maybe that'll be in a new push update at some point.
Then they can dance.
They can dance. There we go. So this is really interesting for me because I think, while everyone knows that there's some practical realities to crowdfunding and, having to have the cart before the horse and, all of that stuff, but I think people assume a more rosy colored glasses reality about, like you get your stuff together and the campaign works. If you raise a bunch of money, you're probably off to the races as well.
Yeah.
The history of crowdfunding as you presented it is a lot less heartwarming than I would have expected. Like there's a lot of very important reality checks that other companies have learned along the way. So this was just really interesting for me to kind of see the different do's and do nots.
Yeah. And I think, as you see in some of these points, like in some respects, there have been safeguards set in place to prevent this type of thing from happening, or certain types of things from happening. Like platforms mandate and enforce communication with backers, and if you don't comply, they can refund your backers without talking to you. Like there are definitely a lot of checks and balances that are in place before that. Now that weren't in place before. The 2007 to 2016 was really the Wild West. Like anything went. There were like times where fraudulent campaigns, I didn't even get into fraudulent campaigns that had no intention of ever delivering a product. But many campaigns like that existed. And, in all of the cases that I listed here, like, these were people that had a vision and they wanted to deliver a really cool product. They were all very passionate. So it is a matter of being really realistic with yourself and what you can deliver and being very transparent. Those are the things that I think matter the most. And I also think it's important to compare like an Oculus that didn't have a $40 million raise with additional funding. Like they had a pretty modest funding given how the company actually ended up. And they are such a smash hit success. So I think it's a matter of just like looking through some of these campaigns and redefining like what actually is success. Is it the short-term success of having a lot of press and having, a $10 million raise, or is it the long-term success of, okay, maybe we'll have a more modest raise, but we can actually do something with this and we can just be really devoted to our customers and build that loyalty instead of having it all kind of blow up in their face. So I think it's tough for a lot of people to be realistic and to not be like seduced by these like really glitzy raise numbers. So that's why it's really important to go back and like look through some of these case studies and remind yourself of the things that really matter.
Wonderful. So we have time for maybe one or two questions. If anyone here on the plateau would like to ask anything of Sarah, you could either direct message her or you could stand up next to the stage and just ask.
Approach the stage.
Oh yeah, approach the stage. Hey, Katie.
Okay, good. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I work with Daniel at Ioterra.
Hi.
Hi. So thank you so much for your presentation. First of all, yes, I learned so much, especially about the potato salad story. So, yeah, that was definitely like a surprise for me. I was like, oh, okay, well, even big dreams can come true. Who knows? Wow, who would have thought? So my question is actually more, and maybe you might actually have experience since you are very well known or educated within crowdfunding. More like crowd investment. I recently, I've known of Kickstarter, Indiegogo for a long time now, and obviously Ioterra, we've always wanted to be a part of their groups and try to learn more about what they're up to and help support product developers, once they get that investment, now to turn it into, go onto their supply chain and do the product development. I recently just learned of crowd investment, which is through another app called Republic.
Yes, yeah, equity crowdfunding.
Fantastic. Yes. Then I guess my question is like, how well do you think that like other campaign or other platforms are going to adapt that model as well? Because I kind of imagine like Republic. I don't know a whole lot about it. I actually just, which sounds very unsafe because I just invested into a company and they were able to raise their investment goal and whatever have you. So that was great. But I only know so much about Republic in terms of just a crowd investment. How many other platforms do you think are just going to catch on to that idea? Because even now with like Series A and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So like, what's the risk level of an equity campaign versus a crowdfunding campaign?
Exactly.
Given the kind of history. Yes. Yeah, I think that there's like a lot lower of a risk level just because of all of the information that needs to be provided to those platforms in order to be even eligible. Indiegogo had an equity crowdfunding option for a short time, and I was a part of the team that was in addition to the work that I was doing on the hardware team, I was a part of the team that was bringing on potential equity campaigns, and the length of interview, there's just much more in depth that needs to be shared and explored. So I do think that they are less risky. From a campaigner's perspective, I've had a few of my campaigners from before Indiegogo and during Indiegogo go on to launch Republic campaigns. And they've actually been pretty good experiences overall. It's a completely different type of crowdfunding in that you can't really publicize it the same way you can a regular campaign. So there has to be a lot more like a word of mouth, sharing the campaign amongst friends, direct outreach from the people. So I also think in that respect, you have an advantage there as someone that's recently invested because they aren't able to just like put it on blast, right? They have to be like very strategic and specific with who they reach out to and how. And I think that they have to frankly like work even harder to get those investments than like putting a few $1,000s worth of ads on Facebook and getting customers that way. So I think you should feel good about that. I also think that one of the things I've heard from friends that have equity crowdfunded products is that those investors are a lot more vocal with them. So I think just maybe talk to some friends that are traditional investors and like what the dynamic is with those campaigners, because I know that campaigners really appreciate the equity investment, the crowdfunding equity investment, but they sometimes can't keep up with like the demand and frequency of questions. So they appreciate when it's more of a quarterly check-in than like wanting a monthly check-in, which is sort of the opposite to regular crowdfunding, which it's like sending a check-in, at least once a week during the campaign, and then at least once a month after the campaign has ended. So you might just kind of see.
I have to step away to start getting the next panel.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Feel free to stay up on the stage or maybe off to the side, Sarah, and you can chat for another handful of minutes, and the next panel will be at 11. So thank you again so much.
Yeah,
thanks everyone for tuning in. Sarah, where can everyone find more information about Artio Consulting?
Oh, yeah. So Artio Consulting, I can present my screen again. I put up some... can you guys see my slide here? I have my email here. It's sarah@askartio.com. And you can feel free to email me. And if for whatever reason you lose that email, you can always reach out to Danny or even Daniel. You can feel free to pass people my information.
I think you might have to click. Oh, never mind. I got it.
Yeah, so here, I'll zoom in. Yeah, so any other questions before I hop off?